Democrats. Anthony, you are the Conservative parliamentary candidate for South Cambridgeshire. I should say at the beginning, I'm going to be interviewing each of the candidates, including Dan Grief, Labour, Ian Sollum, Liberal Democrats. The others, I've given an invite to everyone to interview them in their homes. We're not interviewing you in your home today. I believe you live in North London, is that right? So there's a bit of a logistics issue there. But why? Can you introduce your connection to the area?
Yeah, so this is my home constituency in a sense. I grew up here and went to school here. I was born in Cambridge, Mill Road Maternity Hospital. I grew up in the village of Falmere on a small farm. I went to school there. I then went to school in Cambridge, including Hills Road Sixth Form College, and I then went to university there. I got married in Foxton, where my parents live, and I've come to this constituency a lot. So I've lived about half my life in the constituency. I'm currently, for work reasons, based in my family home is in North London.
Okay, and what's your sort of key pitch in the election? Why you? Why not the others?
So I'm trying to campaign on local issues, and I'm not a career politician, but I've got a lot of experience. I was a journalist for 20 years or so at the Times, BBC and Observer. I was in charge of economic development in London in Boris Johnson's first term as Mayor of London, in charge of infrastructure programmes and welfare to work programmes. And then I ran the British Bankers Association. I led the negotiations for the banking industry in the wake of the financial crisis, trying to get them to be more customer friendly and put customers first and lend to small businesses. I want to bring that as experience to help the constituency I grew up in and love, and that's why I'm putting myself forward. At this particular time, the reason why I've decided to get involved in politics and not do something that's easier is I'm terrified of a Jeremy Corbyn government. I think he would destroy the country very quickly.
So it's opposition to Labour, not local issues that's brought you to the election?
Well, I want to be able to help local issues. I only stood for one seat. This is it. South Cambs, and I want to be able to help South Cambs. And I've been canvassing for 4 months already. I've been talking to literally thousands of people, knocking on doors and in community groups and so on about the issues affecting them. I've already been campaigning on some of those issues, and it brings a real joy to me to be able to actually, make change that helps people in their lives.
So key local issues, what are they? What are your big pushes here?
Well, the biggest local issue is the pace of development in this area and the consequences of it. And so whether it's a lot of new housing, we've got 3 times the national average of new housing in South Cambs compared to other districts around the country, more than anywhere else in East Anglia. We do need new housing, but there are consequences of building so many so quickly, and it's not just the impact on the rural landscape. We absolutely need to protect the rural landscape. It's the fact that it leads to a lot more traffic congestion. People are really fed up with all the how long it takes to get into work and the shops, and we need better transport.
So are you saying we're building too many houses at the moment in South Cambs?
Too rapidly.
Yeah,
I think we need.
And so if you want to make a change to that, where do you put who's responsible for that at the moment? Do you think who's to blame for this sort of because you've characterised it as overdevelopment?
Yeah,
who's
overdevelopment.
So who's to blame?
It's both. I mean, there's also national government sets targets for housing, and then local authorities implement exactly where it goes, whether it's in this village or
because
that
you're
village or
running
that
as
way.
a Conservative. I mean, we've had a Conservative government for the last 9 years. Conservatives have been in power at South Cambridgeshire District Council up until 2018, so the rate of development presumably goes back to decisions in their time. Conservatives in the county council and the combined authority. I mean, it's and being a Conservative MP up until very recently as well. I mean, is it not your own party's record you're now competing with?
So the amount of house building has accelerated dramatically in the last year or so. If you look at the number of new starts, it's now about 1,000 houses a year, whereas historically it's
from decisions made just in that year.
I don't know exactly when the decisions were made. But it has accelerated.
I understand there's quite a high rate of development in South Cambridgeshire that goes back from a period of time where the local plan and there were sort of land supply issues and developers were getting through. But again, this is under a Conservative council.
So my job as MP is to represent the interests of the constituents here, and it doesn't. I'm not
from your own party's politics.
Well, MPs, their job is, this applies to all MPs, their job is to reflect the interests of their constituents and to represent it to national government, whatever the colour of national government, and indeed, if it involves local authorities, with the local authorities. So if there are, it doesn't really matter who the national government is or the local party is, your job is to represent their interests.
As a representative of the area, presumably if it's a Conservative programme of house building, if it's fair to characterise it.
I'm totally committed to new housing. We need new housing. I think there's an actual moral obligation for young people need to get on the housing ladder.
It's the pace in South Cambridgeshire.
It's the fact that South Cambridge is a wonderful area. It's got very low unemployment. It's got beautiful landscape, easy to build on. It's got connectivity to Cambridge and London. It's about our fair share of housing. That actually we have got more new housing here than a lot of major cities like Brighton or Sheffield or indeed Cambridge City or Bradford. We've got more housing than any other district in East Anglia. And all I'm saying is we need to balance it out a bit. You don't want to do all your housing in one. Not all of it, but such a disproportionate amount of new housing in one area. But also, it's about the planning for it. So, because one of the big issues is that the developing housing without actually thinking through the infrastructure consequences beforehand, all the consequences on environment, like water shortages. So we've got a massive problem.
Why not run for say the district council then, which is the planning authority? Or the combined authority, which is the strategic authority for the area.
It's not the only issue. You're picking up on this.
Sorry, I asked you what the big issues were, and that was
that's one of the big issues.
Okay.
Yeah,
are there big issues for the area then?
Well,
sorry, before we move on, can I ask you what's an example of an large-scale development or development in South Cambridgeshire that you're sort of against? Can you point to a specific?
Yeah. So in what I call Foxton Newtown, they call Foxton Garden Village. It's 1,800 houses between Foxton and Barrington and Shepworth. And effectively, it will combine those three villages into a new town, and it's a beautiful part of the countryside I know extremely well, and it's just open landscape at the moment. There'll be huge consequences for those villages. They're all very opposed to it because they want to live in little villages. They don't want to live in a town, but also that particular area has got massive gridlock already on the A10 there. It gets incredibly blocked. And so actually having so many new houses there without sorting out transport will be problematic.
So other key issues for the constituency?
Well, so broadly protecting the rural landscape, not building the green belt, improving transport, so east-west rail. So this is a national government decision from Oxford to Cambridge. I think it's brilliant to have it. I think it should go north with a stop through Cambourne rather than south with a stop through Bassingbourne. Cambourne, there's commuter demand for it already. They want to be able to get into Cambridge quickly for work. Down in Bassingbourne, there's no commuter demand for it. They're near Royston.
So you're for the northern route.
For the northern route, and I've been speaking to ministers, Department of Transport, Number 10, Treasury about it, and I'm pretty confident that if elected, the government will then choose the northern route.
And I should say, for the record, I think I'm right in saying that the Liberal Democrats, especially locally, have been pushing hard for the northern route as well. I know when I asked the Labour candidate Dan Grieve, he was in favour of the northern route. So it's sort of we're all in agreement
But there's only one candidate who's actually spoken to the government and changed the government's mind on it.
But presumably, government's such a key infrastructure decision. They're not going to make it just from the sort of, lobbying from their own party's candidates. And presumably, they'll make it in the best interest and take on all views.
Absolutely. But they do rely on input from people who know the area well, the local people, and obviously the local authorities have an input, etc.
But you haven't been on the scene of local politics in South Cambridgeshire until very recently for this election. I mean, people have been having this arguing for the northern route, like the local district council for a long time.
So one of the things I bring to the table is that, given the experience I've got, is I know I can deliver national government for South Cambridgeshire. I know all the ministers. I can talk to Number 10. They'll speak to me. Absolutely, and that's one of the roles of the MP is to do that. And because I've got a huge amount of experience,
wouldn't necessarily be if
I can deliver that access already, but they wouldn't necessarily. I already have people coming to me. I don't want to name names, but people in authorities in South Cambridgeshire coming to me saying, "Can I sort out?" You feel
like the government, your Conservative government, wouldn't listen to a local representative in the same way if they weren't Conservative.
It's not that. It's not just about party politics. It's about access, knowing people, being able to open doors, etc. And the fact is that I've already got authorities coming to me saying, "Can you go and open the doors for me? Can you go and help sort this out for me?" And I'm already doing that. So I'm not the MP.
I'll take it away from local issues for a moment. And the people calling it the Brexit election. You're the only pro-Brexit candidate standing in South Cambridgeshire. What's behind that choice? Very briefly, if you could.
Well, it's that my stance is basically one of democracy. I mean, there was a referendum.
South Cambridgeshire voted for Remain, I understand, by a majority in the 2016
South
referendum.
Cambridgeshire did vote for Remain back in 2016.
So the democracy argument runs both ways, presumably.
So the first democracy argument, then pick up on your point. So fundamentally, it's about democracy as a country. It's about we had a referendum, it had a result. All the major political parties, including Lib Dems and Labour at the time, said they would respect the result of the referendum. There was a result. Then 80% of MPs were elected on a manifesto commitment to deliver the referendum, and they didn't deliver
Boris
it. So
Johnson
for me,
voted against one of the deals, though, didn't he? I mean, who would be leading your party?
He did, and then he voted for it.
So there's no consistency from the Conservatives on that either, is there?
Well, you can't really accuse Boris Johnson of wanting to stop Brexit. But anyway, that's about the details of a particular deal. But coming back to your point about the South Cambs being Remain, yes. But what I've found, knocking on thousands of doors, is there's a lot of people changing their opinions, and I found virtually no one who voted for Brexit who's changed their mind, as it happens. What I have found amongst the people who voted Remain, they fall into three different groups. There's the first group that actually don't have very strong opinions about it, and we tend to think everyone's got strong opinions on Brexit, but actually not everyone does. And they said, well, I voted Remain, it was a referendum, we lost, we should just get on with it. There's those who voted Remain slightly more passion, who said don't want Brexit, don't like the result of the referendum, but actually after 3.5 years of gridlock and delay and this paralysis and the country not getting on, they just think we should just get on with it. And then there's a third group who committed to trying to stop Brexit and to overturn the referendum result. So it's not clear to me where the opinion lies in South Cambs at the moment, but more importantly,
the best evidence we have would suggest that it's for Remain.
But this, if I'm elected, I'll be elected on a manifesto commitment to just get Brexit over and done with, and then focus on other issues.
But you've used that's a Conservative Party slogan, "Get Brexit done," isn't it? I'd be interested.
Just to follow up one point, you wouldn't want me to get elected on a manifesto commitment and then immediately renege on it and campaign against it. We've already had that in this constituency. It doesn't go down very well.
I take your point on that. So get Brexit done. I think it is a slogan. There's no substance in that. I mean, more specifically, what are you hoping will be achieved on Brexit? You for the Prime Minister's deal, presumably?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, there is a deal that's been negotiated with the other EU 27 countries.
And you think that deal will be good for South Cambridgeshire?
I think it would be good for South Cambridgeshire to get Brexit over and done with and focus on all the other issues like health.
But the deal specifically, will we be better off under that deal than we currently are under our current arrangements with the EU and other nations in the world? Yeah,
no, I think it would be good for the country just to get on with Brexit, absolutely.
But specifically to my question, you think South Cambridgeshire will be better off under the Prime Minister's Brexit deal than under its current terms?
Yeah, we need to get Brexit over.
And not because we'll be moving out of a period of uncertainty, just on the comparison between the two.
The deal that the Prime Minister has is just as you know, it's a transition arrangement basically. So it lasts for 1 year. It's basically, I mean, there are changes.
So it won't be getting it done though.
Well, we will leave the EU. So
but you're saying you can't compare it because it won't be getting it done. You can't have it both ways. Presumably, you're either getting Brexit done or you're not. I mean, do you know what terms you're after here and how those terms will affect South Cambridgeshire? I mean, how can you be for it if you don't know what impact it will have?
Well, we know the impact. What I was saying, it's a transition arrangement. So on most things, at the moment it stays the same. So things that affect South Cambridgeshire dramatically, like it's a very agricultural area, so things like tariffs for farmers, for farm produce, and things like access to markets, that all stays the same. There'll be no change when Brexit happens. The key issue then is the future arrangement, the future partnership agreement between the UK and the EU, and that will be negotiated over the following year. On that, I want as close partnership with the EU as possible. I think it's very important. I'm pro free trade.
But not as close as we have now.
Well, ideally, we would have a situation that's as close as we have now in terms of trade. I don't want tariffs. I want full open
Which
market
part of
access.
it do you want to take out then? Which parts of our terms are you against?
Well, things like the financial contributions we make, do
you not have to pay those financial contributions if you want sort of those close trade relations?
No, that's all subject to negotiation. So if you so this is getting quite detailed, but I mean, if you're a member of the single market or the European Economic Area like Norway is, then yes, they make a big financial contribution.
We won't have time to go into all the details. But essentially, you believe that we will have a very close. You want a very close trading relationship without paying money to the EU.
But actually, the main thing is, as I say, just about respect for democracy. And actually, we had a referendum, and I think we just need to get. And just very
briefly, last thing on Brexit is: are you anti No Deal?
I absolutely don't want to see No Deal. No,
and would you vote against your party, maybe even resign over opposition to No Deal?
That's a hypothetical question.
Yes, well, quite a simple one though, isn't it? Would you vote against your party?
I'll cross that bridge when it comes.
So you won't commit to voting against any kind of.
We've got a deal on the table.
I know we do, but I'm asking you about not an unreasonable hypothetical, which is would you vote against anything?
I'm not going to commit to that now. No, I'll cross that bridge when it comes. Okay. And it depends on the circumstances of the time, and we'll see. And I don't think we'll get there. I don't want No Deal. I think it will be disruptive. I don't think it will be completely disastrous to the country, but I think it would be far better to have a partnership agreement.
Okay, understood. Your candidacy in the election has come with some controversy. It's mainly surrounded previous comments you've made working as a journalist, as you've already referenced. When I was at the Homerton College hustings, a member of the public there described articles you'd written. The word they described it as was racist. In your response, you did condemn racism. You didn't deny that the articles were racist, however. And what you said was that they were written 17 years ago. You said you have since apologised repeatedly, and then by way of justification, you said the role of journalism is to, quoting you, provoke debate. But as an MP, you would bring people together. Is that a sort of moral justification to print offensive, potentially even racist comments as acting as a journalist?
The articles were a very long time ago. 17 years ago, which is a life prison sentence. I have, as you mentioned, I've apologised repeatedly in the past.
Yes.
They were provocative. They were, insensitive.
You reject the characterisation as racist.
This all depends on how you define racism. I just said that they're provocative, and the thing is, I am completely opposed to racism and discrimination and bigotry, and I have shown throughout my life other times that that's the case.
Is that a moral justification? Is that an acceptable moral justification to say that they're deliberately provocative? Because the words you've also used to defend them is deliberately provocative to act as a journalist.
As a journalist, let's say part of the role of a journalist is provoke debate and to put things out in the public domain that are difficult.
Were they your views, not your honestly held views?
Well, the language I use is not me. Anyone who knows me is I'm actually very.
The language you've used does not represent you.
I'm very opposed to, as I said, very opposed to racism and discrimination. I'm very international. I'm actually half Norwegian. I'm part Irish. I'm part French. All my family are. All my aunts, uncles, and cousins, first cousins, are foreigners. I'm the son of an immigrant. I'm the husband of an immigrant. I'm the father of an immigrant. So I'm not anti-immigration at all. And this was at a time, I wrote this stuff at a time when the government was calling for or pushing for immigration without any upper limit. And I said we should control immigration. But look, it's not. I'm completely committed.
Well, can I? Because in your defence, you said that there's one thing working as a journalist and provoking debate, and one thing being an MP. Well, if you can just let me ask the question, is there a similar possibility that you might say one thing as a candidate and then do one thing as an MP?
No,
might we be looking at the same?
No, so I really think integrity in politics is important, and I really think, and one of the things that frustrates me, and I know you'll probably ask some difficult follow-up questions about this, I think we really need to restore trust in politics, and certainly if I am elected, one of the things I'll try and work very hard to do is restore trust in politics, and I think politicians who are leaders, who are figureheads, who are elected to represent people, have an absolute moral duty to represent all their constituents, whatever their views and backgrounds, and to bring people together. It's not the role of politicians, or it actually shouldn't be the role of politicians to pitch one group of citizens against another group of citizens to be divisive.
Did you do that in your time as a journalist? I think you said that Muslims had divided loyalty.
I didn't. That's a complete misquotation.
It's a misquotation.
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing that's going on here, there's a lot of negative campaigning in this election, and people are taking. As somebody who's been in the public domain for about 30 years, public eye for about 30 years, you can go and read lots of things about me. And it's a bit like picking out quotes from the Bible from and
well, let me carry on picking out quotes then, because I would like to move on to a different issue, which is the NHS. It's obviously a key issue here. We've got Addenbrooke's Hospital in the constituency. You have previously said in an article titled "Why the NHS is Bad for Us," called for the NHS to be scrapped. I think that article was written in 2001. I should.
18 years old. Yeah.
Yes, but can I just ask, is that still your view?
No, absolutely not. No, I'm very committed to the NHS. I think so. That at that time, so this is going back nearly 20 years. The Labour government at the time, I was health editor of the Observer newspaper, and I was spending all my time.
Hold on a second. Well, if we're going to talk about what the relevance was happening at the time, you said in 2001, you said you used to be a believer, but came to the conclusion it can never work. So never, not related to the time. You said the ideology, we should ditch the ideology, ditch the NHS. You described it as communist. Yeah. Communist style healthcare.
Yeah. So at the time, the Labour government was encouraging debate about different models of healthcare and looking at, and I do talk about this in the article, look at the French model, which at the time, and I don't know now, but at the time was deemed the best healthcare system in the world, or the German system. Nobody wants American, that's a bit of a distraction, that clearly doesn't work. And I spent a lot of time talking to doctors and to other healthcare professionals, and the NHS has, the NHS always has problems in terms of waiting lists and so on. But
it's not about, there's a nuanced position, isn't there, between whether or not you can criticise them. Obviously, as I think you said in the article, if we don't criticise the NHS, there'll be issues. But it's the language as well.
I spent a lot of, clearly, I've forgotten I'd written this article actually, so rereading it. Clearly, I'm writing it from the patient's perspective. I spend a lot of time talking to patients, and people are waiting for diagnosis, people are waiting for treatment, people are left on trolleys.
You said no organisation that causes the misery the NHS does can be defended on ethical grounds. Writing as a patient.
There's a lot of patients who really struggle with treatment in the NHS, and that is a problem. But I am an absolute supporter of the NHS, and the reason is this, that there have been a lot of, one of the things I point out, and again rereading this article nearly 20 years ago, we need a lot more funding for healthcare, but that has come through. If you compare funding now
you do make that point in the article.
We clearly as a country need to spend far more for healthcare, and I think I've made that point consistently. Okay. I think it's now 9% of GDP.
So in favour of the NHS.
But also the reforms there have been, and which actually started with that Labour government, Alan Milburn, when he was Health Secretary, which are about giving patients more information, about giving patients more choice, have actually, I think, worked really well. And the NHS, absolutely, I had a crisis of confidence, shall we say, or crisis of faith at the time. And actually, I'm a huge supporter of the NHS as a universal healthcare, free of the point of use, taxpayer funded.
Well, because you did say people should pay more if they want the gold style treatment. You don't believe that?
Well, there was a debate at the time, and this was about whether patients and who want to go into a hospital and get a private room with better food, whether they should pay more or not.
Do you still think they should?
I don't have settled views on it. I'd actually prefer. I'd prefer a health system. Let me tell you what I'd like. I prefer. Look, I want a health system where people, whatever their income, have the same level of access, get the same treatment that's free at the point of use, and actually they're treated the same in the health system. I don't want a health system that is divisive, where you get different tiers of treatment.
So you do have settled views on that. Can I just ask you, leading off from the NHS question and also on the comments we sort of referenced earlier, I suppose the question, they both go to what you've already mentioned, which is about integrity in politics and arguably consistency as well. You said in 2001, in a prominent position, writing for, I think it was the Observer newspaper, that the NHS can never work. And then the issue, I suppose the issue is can we be sure that you'll be consistent if you are elected, that you'll consistently represent the views people might elect you on? Because there seems to be, that's a large shift, and it's not just a shift in your position. It's the language, it's the rhetoric, isn't it? It's quite strong. It's not. That's not nuanced.
I'm a good writer. So you're quoting something 20 years ago. Are you allowed to change your minds at all? If the facts change, I change my mind, as Keynes says.
But not over the next 5 years of a parliamentary.
No, I think the NHS has proved. So again, this is 20 years ago, and I changed my mind shortly after. I had a crisis of confidence 20 years ago when I was health editor of the Observer. The NHS has proved that it can work. It is dearly beloved, quite rightly, by this country.
I think you've clearly explained that you're now for it with.
The reforms in the system have shown that it can be adaptable and give more tailored treatment to people, and that's brilliant.
Can I ask you,
And I've spent quite a lot of time in Edinburgh. So
let me ask you one quick one before we round off on something that you may prefer to speak about. Let's just talk about school funding, because I know that you've campaigned that the schools here aren't getting enough funding. Am I right in thinking that's a campaign issue for you?
Absolutely, it's one of my 6 campaign themes. Yeah.
So Cambridgeshire's has had an issue with underfunding for the schools. County Council here says it's one of the worst funded education authorities in England, and you've said something needs to be done to address that. But again, are we not back to, the Conservatives been in power 9 years, Conservative County Council? I mean, are you the candidate to take on that issue?
The funding formula is set nationally, and the county council just receives the money it
right.
gets.
And the government has been a Conservative government.
Well, yeah, although this funding formula was set actually by the last Labour government, as it happens.
And the Conservatives haven't changed it in 9 years.
Well, they have changed it now.
Let's talk about the current change.
The government. Let me answer the question. The government has now, as of about a month ago, set a new funding formula where there's a minimum guarantee of £4,000 for primary school pupils and £5,000 for secondary school pupils. And because we're so below the national average, we disproportionately benefit for that. The point I'd make generally is, I think it's in the interest of the voters and the residents of South Cambs to have someone who's prepared to fight their corner in government, irrespective of the colour of the government. But actually, if you have more access to the government, you're able to fight their corner more clearly. And I've shown in this that I'm not a puppet for the government, whatever, just following the government line. I will absolutely champion the interests of South Cambridgeshire, whether it's East-West Rail, whether it's housing, whether it's education funding in national government, and I've shown that I can deliver results.
And on this, so since that announcement has been made by government to increase the minimum per pupil
it's coming in over 2 years.
Yes,
so it's not
but even with that factored in, I think I'm right in saying that the county council still forecasting a accumulated deficit of 16 million over the next few years for Cambridgeshire. Especially a big part of the overspend that they've currently got is actually on special educational needs.
Yeah.
Are you sort of still to defend that new funding formula when I think the words head teachers have said it just simply isn't enough?
I've said also, and I'm not just saying it to you now, but I've said it. If you look at various things I've written during the election campaign, the new funding formula is the first step. We need to go further. There's no reason why we should still have so much lower funding than the national average. So no, I'll carry on championing it. It's the first step. It's not the final result. We still need to carry on and get more. But there's other things in education. I mean, the one thing the national government has announced is that the starting salary of teachers will be £30,000, which is quite a rise. And I'm absolutely delighted with that, because one of the issues across the country, but South Cambs is affected by it, is the difficulty in recruiting and retaining good teachers. And actually, education starts with good teachers. The teachers are excellent, but actually, if you pay them properly, it'll make it more likely that experienced people will stay in education and bring their experience to help children.
So last one, just to round off. I mean, we've touched on some of the local issues, but is there any other sort of key issues, key messages for voters on why choose you? What haven't I asked you?
Well, haven't you asked me? It's been quite a comprehensive interview. I think you've done quite a good job. I mean, look, I'm somebody with a lot of experience who loves this area, knows this area really well. I grew up here. I can fight its corner in national government, and if I'm elected and people get to know me, they'll know I'm a sort of good, decent guy with integrity, and I really want to serve the constituency.
All right, Anthony, thank you so much for doing this.